The squid can't see color. Its eye has just a single type of light-sensitive cell, which means the entire world around it is stripped of red, green, and blue. It sees that world in a way you and I can't even begin to imagine. But here's what turns everything on its head. At the same time, it picks up something the human eye can't detect at all, under any kind of vision or any kind of lighting, the polarization of light. So a creature that's essentially blind to color reads an entire dimension within an ordinary ray of sunlight, a dimension that's sealed off from us completely. And now a question for you personally. Have you eaten squid this week? Maybe rings and batter, maybe grilled pieces, or perhaps thin strips in a salad? Most likely you have, or at the very least you've seen it at the counter and walked right past without giving it a second thought. It's caught on such a monstrous scale that fleets of squid boats light up the water more brightly than entire cities. And these lights are clearly visible from space. They show up as bright spots in nighttime satellite images of the planet. And yet almost none of us knows the first thing about this animal beyond how it looks on a plate. We really should know more, because hidden inside that soft body is a whole list of oddities that are hard to believe at first. The squid has blue blood, built around copper. It doesn't have one heart, but three. Its skin changes patterns faster than you can blink. Its deep-sea relatives grow eyes the size of dinner plates. And the most incredible thing we'll save for the middle of the story: its ability to rewrite its own genetic instructions on the fly, in real time, adjusting them to current conditions as it lives. We'll go through it all in order, from a single cell down to the coldest depths of the ocean. Stick around until the middle. That's where a discovery awaits that will forever change the way you look at the squid on your plate. But first, let's honestly answer a simple question. What exactly is this creature? In everyday speech, we tend to call it seafood and lump it together with fish, but that's fundamentally wrong. The squid is a cephalopod mollusk, and its closest relatives aren't herring or cod, but octopuses, cuttlefish, and nautiluses. The range of sizes within this family is staggering. There are tiny species the size of a human fingernail, and there's the colossal squid, the heaviest invertebrate on the entire planet, capable of weighing up to half a ton. The ones that end up on our plates, of course, aren't the giants, but the species that form the backbone of the global fishery: the Japanese flying squid, the Argentine short-fin squid, and the Humboldt squid. Its body is built on a plan that looks nothing like ours. The main part is the mantle, a soft, muscular sac. At the front sits a head with enormous, strikingly expressive eyes that look too big for it. Then come the arms and two longer feeding tentacles. The squid moves by jet propulsion. It draws water inside and forcefully expels it through a narrow funnel, shooting off in the opposite direction. The only hard part of its body is a thin internal rod called the gladius. And here's a fact that's genuinely hard to believe. Some species push out their jet of water with such force that they literally launch out of the sea and glide above the surface for dozens of meters. This isn't a flowery turn of phrase, but real flying squid, filmed more than once right from the decks of ships. Now about how it gets its food, because as a hunter it's merciless and lightning fast. At the decisive moment, it shoots out its two feeding tentacles in a flash, and at the ends sit suckers ringed with tiny hard teeth that dig into the prey and won't let it escape. And right in the center, between the arms, hides a hard beak that looks like a bird's, which it uses to butcher its catch. Humboldt squid don't even hunt alone. They hunt collectively, gathering in huge schools of hundreds and even thousands of individuals. And during this group hunt they flash and shimmer and sync across their entire skin, as if signaling to one another in code. And here we come to the most interesting part, to how it actually thinks. The squid has a real, large, and complex brain, but it's organized in a way completely unlike ours. Its brain forms a ring around the esophagus, the digestive tube, which means any swallowed prey literally passes straight through the very center of its brain. And there's more. A huge portion of its nerve cells has been moved out of the head entirely, into the arms. Each arm has its own, largely independent nervous system, which is why scientists say the squid thinks not only with its head, but with its whole body at once. Let's wrap up this section with what makes the squid a living legend of the sea: its camouflage. This isn't just an ability to blend in with the background, but an entire multi-layered system built right into the skin. 3 different layers of cells work together, each with an unfamiliar name. One handles colored spots, another handles shine and reflection, and the third provides a clean white backdrop. By controlling them, the squid changes the pattern and shade of its entire body almost instantly. And this system serves not only for camouflage, but also for communication. And here's where the most astonishing thing lies hidden. Squid have a secret, hidden channel of communication. They send each other signals in polarized light, the very kind they see perfectly themselves, but which their predators don't notice at all. The result is a real secret correspondence carried out in plain sight of the whole ocean. A fellow squid will calmly read the message, while a hunter swimming past won't catch on to a thing. Is the squid intelligent? This isn't a rhetorical question, but a genuine unsolved scientific problem. And the main difficulty is that these animals are nearly impossible to study properly. They tolerate captivity very poorly, die from stress, and don't adapt well to aquariums, so every experiment performed on them costs scientists enormous effort. Still, a few things have been figured out, though more often not on squid themselves, but on their closest relatives. Cuttlefish, for example, were put through a clever test very similar to the famous children's experiment with a treat, in which a child is offered either one candy right now or the chance to wait and receive 2 later. In this trial, the cuttlefish refused the food lying right in front of it and waited patiently, knowing that after a pause, it would be given something tastier. The ability to consciously postpone pleasure for a better outcome had previously been considered a sign of high intelligence and was found only in ravens and primates. But let's get back to the main paradox we started with. The squid doesn't perceive color. It's essentially colorblind. And yet it matches the pattern of its skin to the surrounding background with the precision of a real artist, unerringly hitting the right shades. How is that even possible? Scientists have proposed an elegant answer. They noticed that the pupil in cephalopods has an unusual curved shape and suggested that this shape is no accident. It's almost as if it deliberately blurs the light, spreading it out into something like a spectrum. Perhaps the squid sees color in a way nothing like ours, precisely through this clever blurring and softness of the image. And on top of all that, it turned out that the light-sensitive proteins are tucked away right inside its skin, meaning its skin, in a sense, picks up light on its own, independently of the eyes. And so we've reached the middle of the story, and that promised discovery. Squid can rewrite their own RNA, the working copies of their genetic instructions. To put it simply, the genome of a living creature is usually thought of as something immovable, a blueprint handed to the organism at birth and never changed again. Well, squid edit these instructions on a massive scale after they've already been read, changing their meaning right as the animal lives. This happens especially actively in the cold. By tuning the workings of its proteins to the water temperature, the animal literally reconfigures itself to match current conditions. And the scale here is staggering. In cephalopods, this kind of editing takes place at tens of thousands of sites, something not seen in any other known creature on Earth. This discovery overturns the familiar idea that an organism is hardwired from the moment of birth. Now let's look inside the body, and we'll start with that famous blue blood. Your blood and mine is red because the oxygen in it is carried by an iron-based protein. In a squid, the same job is done by an entirely different protein, built on copper, and it's the copper that gives its blood that blue color. And this isn't some whim of nature, but a precise calculation. Such blood works noticeably more efficiently in cold water and in places where oxygen is scarce, which is exactly the kind of environment a squid most often has to live in. The story with the hearts is no less curious. A squid has 3 of them, but there's one important catch. The main systemic heart stops at the very moment the squid makes its jet-propelled dash. That's why it's capable only of a short, powerful burst of speed, never a long marathon, and that's exactly why, once hooked, it so quickly wears itself out and dies. After that, it's worth talking about cold light, about bioluminescence. Many squid can glow, and it's light without heat, produced by special chemical reactions, and it serves several purposes at once. Take the Hawaiian bobtail squid. It houses living luminous bacteria in a special organ and uses them with remarkable cunning. It lights itself from below just enough to erase its own shadow and become invisible to anything looking up at it from the depths. And in Toyama Bay in Japan, something truly miraculous happens. Every year, millions of tiny firefly squid rise to the surface to spawn and bathe the entire water in a steady blue glow, turning the shore into an annual spectacle that draws people from all over the world. But the loudest story in this part is neither myth nor legend. It's a very real event of our time. I'm talking about the colossal squid. This species was described and named exactly 100 years ago in 1925, and for almost the entire past century, people knew it only indirectly. From beaks found in the stomachs of sperm whales, and from the characteristic scars on the bodies of Antarctic toothfish. No one had ever seen the living animal in its native environment. And then, in 2025, exactly on the centenary of its discovery, it was filmed alive for the first time in history by an expedition of the Schmidt Institute using an underwater robotic vehicle at a depth of about 600 meters near the South Sandwich Islands. What appeared on the recording was a transparent juvenile only 30 centimeters long, though adults of this species grow up to 7 meters in length and up to half a ton in weight, remaining the heaviest invertebrate on the planet. It has the largest eyes of any known animal, the size of a soccer ball, and hooks at the tips of its tentacles that rotate a full 360 degrees. And its only enemy in the entire ocean is the sperm whale. And all of this ends with a harsh, almost unfair twist. All the complexity I've described, the 3-hearted body, the gene editing, the astonishing intelligence, is granted to this creature for roughly a single year. A squid grows rapidly, reproduces once in its life, and dies, and its death is programmed in advance, built into the genome as a direct instruction rather than arriving from old age or exhaustion. This was confirmed by experiments on octopuses. As soon as the special glands responsible for this program were removed, the animal stopped dying on schedule and lived noticeably longer. And there's a separate bitter detail here. About how the colossal squid actually reproduces, we still know almost nothing. It remains one of the last blank spots of the deep. It's time to step beyond biology and look at what this animal means for you and me and for the whole ocean. Let's start with the scale of the fishery, because the numbers here are genuinely sobering. Squid are caught in the millions of tons per year, which puts them alongside such giants of the seafood table as tuna and pollock. The largest fishery in the world is run by China's distant water fleet, casting its nets across every ocean on the planet, with the key fishing grounds concentrated off the coasts of Argentina and Peru. The method of catching them, meanwhile, is brilliantly simple and hinges on a single weakness of the animal: its irresistible attraction to light. At night, the vessels switch on powerful lamps. The squid rise toward the surface drawn by that glow, and there they're taken on special lures with no bait at all. There are so many of these light fishing fleets in the ocean, and they're so bright that they form entire glowing cities on satellite images of nighttime Earth. So it turns out that the entire massive fishery is built on deceiving and exploiting that very love of light we talked about at the very beginning. Behind the fishery comes a whole cultural layer, since squid has long been firmly established in the cuisines of many peoples. In Japan, it's made into sarum and served as ika. In Korea, fried ojinjeo is sold right on the street as a familiar snack. In the Mediterranean, it's known and loved as calamari. And in Spain, they prepare tender chipirrones and serve the famous dish squid in its own ink. But behind all this gastronomy lies a far more important twist that's easy to miss. Squid don't feed only people. They're a key load-bearing point of almost every marine food chain. They're eaten by tuna, sharks, dolphins, sperm whales, and seabirds, and in turn, they themselves consume colossal quantities of fish. By total mass of all living bodies, the world's squid are comparable to all the commercial fish on the planet combined. That means what we have here isn't just a beer snack, but one of the load-bearing structures of the entire ocean, without which the whole construction would start to wobble. And from here begins the alarming line of the story. The warming of the ocean hits the squid directly, right at its physiology. Remember that copper-based blue blood. In warm water, it copes noticeably worse with carrying oxygen, which means the animal's very existence becomes harder, precisely where the water is heating up. On top of that, dead zones are expanding in the ocean, where almost no oxygen remains, and the acidification of the water is gradually breaking down chitin, the very material the beak and the little teeth on the suckers are made of. And here a grim paradox arises, backed by very specific data. Studies have shown that against the backdrop of a general decline of marine ecosystems, cephalopod numbers worldwide aren't falling. On the contrary, they're rising. Squid are simply moving into the void left by the disappearing fish, filling the empty space. And this is by no means a good sign or an indication that the ocean is healthy. It's a symptom of a dangerous simplification of the system, of its impoverishment and fragility when complex diversity gives way to a few hardy species. Now, about the squid's contribution to science, and here the second promise we made at the very beginning of our conversation comes into play. The squid has a giant nerve axon, that is, a long projection of a nerve cell, and it reaches nearly a millimeter in thickness, thousands of times thicker than ours. It was precisely because of this incredible thickness that two scientists, Hodgkin and Huxley, back in the middle of the 20th century, were able to work with it properly, and for the first time in history, describe the very mechanism of the nerve impulse, how a signal travels along our nerves. For this discovery, they received the Nobel Prize in 1963. And here's what's important to grasp. Everything we know today about how nerves work, about how we feel, move, and think, was discovered by humanity in large part thanks to this unassuming sea creature. But modern science hasn't let the squid out of its hands either, and continues to draw ideas from it. The proteins from the sucker rings on its tentacles are being studied as a basis for the materials of the future, self-healing, and at the same time safely biodegradable in nature. The reflective proteins of its remarkable skin are inspiring engineers to develop adaptive camouflage that could adjust itself to its background, like living tissue. And those very RNA editing sites we talked about midway through the story are already helping scientists pinpoint important functional sites in human proteins and better understand our own bodies. It turns out that the creature we're used to seeing only in a frying pan is quietly pushing forward several cutting-edge fields of knowledge at once. And so we come back to where we started, to a simple question. Did you eat squid this week? Now, after everything that's been said, that question sounds completely different than it did at the very beginning. We're used to dividing all of nature in advance into two unequal parts, that which is supposed to be admired and protected, and that which is perceived simply as food, as something taken for granted on the plate. But the whole truth is that this boundary doesn't run through nature itself at all. The colossal squid is no less astonishing because its smaller relatives end up in our salads. The boundary runs inside us, in our gaze and our habit of not stopping to think, not in the workings of the living world. And finally, an image that closes out this whole real-life story. Somewhere right now, in the cold black darkness off the coast of Antarctica, a transparent baby colossal squid is slowly drifting, the very one that, for the first time in history, was captured by a human camera lens. It glides through the water column, swiveling its enormous eyes the size of a soccer ball, and, as the scientists themselves put it, it has not the slightest idea that humans even exist. It doesn't know about the satellites shining into space with the reflected light of fishing fleets, or the Nobel Prizes that grew out of its relatives, or about us, watching it through a screen. It just lives out its short life in the darkness, and somehow that makes it even more wondrous.